Welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. Our theme for 2025 is the future of work. Meaning is the new money. In a world shaped by rapid innovation and constant change, the pursuit of purpose and impact has never been more important. I'm Dr. John Dentico, your host, bringing over 30 years of experience in leadership, strategic thinking, and purpose-driven innovation. Here, we tackle the pressing challenges of our time, from the rise of artificial intelligence to the growing need for meaning in the workplace. Together, we'll uncover how leaders can ethically integrate AI to enhance decision-making and keep humanity at the heart of their organizations. Remember, amidst all the technological advancements, in the end, it's always about the people. This podcast is your resource for actionable tools, thought-provoking discussions, and inspiring stories. It's time to go beyond leadership development and focus on leadership impact, creating workplaces where people thrive, innovation flourishes, and meaning truly becomes the new currency. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Now, let's throttle up and dive into today's episode. Hello and welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Dr. John Dentico. With me today is Mike Harbour, the leadership expert, author, and founder of Harbour Resources, a company dedicated to excellence in leadership and personal growth. Mike has trained and coached thousands of professionals to become more effective in their roles. A prolific author, Mike has written 3 books: Power Principles, Quit Losing Talent, and Quit Losing Talent Expanded Edition, and co-authored another book called Breaking Average. His insights into leadership, talent retention, and organizational culture have made him a sought-after advisor for businesses and teams looking to elevate their leadership capabilities. Mike is a former faculty member of the John Maxwell team, former chair for the John C. Maxwell Leadership Award, and a former co-host of the Maxwell Leadership Podcast. His expertise in leadership development is further demonstrated through his own Lead Up podcast, where he has published over 350 episodes, sharing invaluable lessons from his experience and interviews with top leaders. With a proven track record of leadership coaching, Mike has interviewed over 20,000 leaders and employees, gaining a deep understanding of the mindsets and skills required to be a great leader, coach, and performer, both in work and in life. His Quit Losing Talent cultural framework is a powerful tool that helps organizations create high-performance cultures and retain top talent. Mike's mission is to equip leaders with the strategies, tools, and mindset they need to lead with excellence, inspire teams, and create lasting impact. I'm truly grateful that he has the time to be with me here this morning. Good morning, Mike. How are you?
John, I'm fantastic. Thanks for that warm intro. You read it just like my wife wrote it. Makes me sound better than I am. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm sure that'll make her happy too. Mike, let's begin with the personal side. Tell me about yourself, where you grew up, and some of the influences that you had in your life.
Yeah, great question. Thanks so much. I'm from Arkansas. As you can probably tell with the accent, I still live in Arkansas. Grew up in a small town, about 10,000 people. I started my life on a little farm, and we moved to a community of about 300 people until 6th grade. And then we moved to the big city, which was 10,000 people. Played baseball, football growing up there, had a lot of great influences in my life, and especially my coaches that really challenged me to be my best. I would say my grandmother was my greatest influence. Still to this day, she's been gone. She passed in 1998, but she was then and still is the greatest influence of my life. She grew up in the Depression, didn't have a lot, but 8th grade educated, one of the smartest people I knew. Great salesperson, great communicator, great relationship builder. She always pushed me to be better. Her thing was, Michael, it's going to get tough, but when it does, just never quit. Still rings true for me today. I went to college for a few years and played baseball. Then I joined the Army. I spent 12 years in the military. I had a ton of great leaders and influencers in my life. All of that shaped who I've become and how I've developed myself over the years to today.
Oh, great. Well, I always appreciate having a fellow veteran on the podcast. So
thank you for your service.
I'll tell you an interesting story. I was at a dry cleaner several months ago, and I bumped into a guy. I have Vietnam veteran plates on my car. I was Navy, off the coast on an aircraft carrier. So I never had to exhibit the kind of courage that people did in country.
Yeah.
But I have great respect. Anyway, there was a Marine infantryman and Vietnam veteran. I said to him, "Thank you for your service." And he turned around and he said to me, "You know what? You were worth it." And that's what I say to most everybody today when they say, "Thank you for your service." You see it in people's eyes. They're just stunned that you would turn around and say, "You were worth it." Thank you for your service as well.
Thank you.
Mike, let's move on to one of my favorite subjects, leadership. Let me ask you this. If someone walked up to you and asked you for your perspective or definition of leadership, what would you tell them?
Deep question. There's a lot of different perspectives on leadership. You can get a definition from 100 people and it would all be different. But the definition I personally carry for my own leadership is a quote that I heard from Jack Welch years ago. When you were made a leader, you weren't given a crown. You were given the responsibility to bring out the best in others. That's my personal definition of leadership, to set aside my crown, my position, my title, and bring out the best in others. I think that's the true essence of leadership. It's what I learned from my grandmother, who I said was a great influence in my life. It's a lot of what I learned from John Maxwell. I began reading John Maxwell's books when I was 23 years old, and then I got to work alongside John and watched him set aside his title, his superiority in leadership and the thought leadership, and really treat people with respect and try to bring out the best in others. And I think that's the true definition of leadership for me. The true measure of leadership is a leader that can develop a leader. If we've done our job well as leaders, we've developed someone else, brought out their best, then they in turn can go do that with someone else, replicate that. It's the law of multiplication. That person they develop can go do that for someone else. That's what leadership is all about, bringing out the best in others and helping them become something maybe they didn't think they could. I grew up, in a very violent, dysfunctional, abusive home, and I needed leaders around me that could bring out the best in me. My grandmother certainly did that when I was around her, and I needed people outside of my home to do that. My driving force, I want to give back to those people that gave to me and pulled out the best in me.
Yeah, I understand that most of the guests that I've had on my podcast would probably agree with you. It is really about inspiration in a manner of speaking, or bringing people along. I have a different take on it because of my orientation on leadership. I look at it as the process of leadership, in the sense that leadership is about making transforming change. Management is much more about making incremental change. They go hand in hand. It's like there was an author one time, I'm not going to mention his name, who said that we need to get rid of all the managers. All we need is leaders. And I said, no, that's wrong, because managers do a great job. They're the people who tweak it, make it efficient, as opposed to leadership, which is looking to make things more effective. Let me ask you this. You've interviewed over 20,000 leaders and employees throughout your career. What are some of the most common leadership challenges you've seen, and how can leaders overcome them?
Yeah, so I think communication is number one, John. I'm sure all the organizations you go into, communication still is and probably always will be the number one challenge in any team or organization or any individual's life. When you think about learning to let go of our biases, we carry these unconscious biases that impact the way we communicate with other people, the perspective that we bring into a situation. And so when I'm working with individuals, it's often about trying to help create awareness around those biases that we carry based on how we were raised, where we came from, the education we have, and not let those things be a block or barrier to communication. From an individual perspective, there's that self-awareness, that growth internally that I have to go through. From an organizational standpoint, it's the same. Great leaders create inclusivity in the room, get all perspectives out on the table, and challenge those biases and perspectives to get all the ideas out. And I think that's what great leaders do in a team or an organization. But individually, we've got to do that within ourselves as well. To me, the number one challenge that we face in the world today is lack of ability to communicate effectively.
It's so interesting you should say that. The leadership model I started developing over 30 years ago is based on one premise, and that is contribution. Contribution. Open the door. Hey, we have a problem. Anybody got any ideas? Anybody want to contribute? Bring people into the process. That's the key. Bring people into the process. Make no judgments about anybody in the room.
Right.
That's rule number one. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to say I have a problem and an issue. How can we work together? How can we collaborate and move the whole organization forward? I absolutely agree with that notion of being able to really bring people together and get their input. It would not be wrong for me, Mike, to say I've been waiting over 30 years for this moment in time. A time when leadership ideas are being shredded. The old positional model of leadership. I know John Maxwell and I agree on the fact that leadership is an influence relationship.
Yeah.
Anybody can have influence.
Mm-hmm.
Now we see ourselves the aftermath of the pandemic. Now we see this incredible rise of artificial intelligence, where everyone in the organization has access to limitless information and knowledge. Be careful when you ask who's the smartest person in the room. A fairly junior individual who's prompting 4 or 5 hours a day on an AI system may have a more global understanding of the things facing the organization. It's all about bringing people into this dynamic. I'd ask you for any further reflections on that.
Yeah, I love you talked about judgment and leadership as influence coming from Maxwell. What we have to understand as leaders is I work with a lot of organizations probably like you, John. They want more critical thinkers in the room. They want more ideas, but because of the judgments we allow in the room, we shut those ideas down, right? Oh, that's stupid. I can't believe you. So people quit bringing ideas to the table because they feel judged for an idea that maybe was dumb initially, but massaged a little bit could become a great idea, right? Leadership is influence. We can influence in a negative way, like we influence people to quit bringing ideas to the table by our simple judgments we make about other people as well. So I think as leaders, if you want to get to that next level, shatter the beliefs about leadership, if we want to shatter the status quo, we've got to make sure we leave our judgments outside the room so we can hear all perspectives.
I agree with you 100%. I think some of it stems from Star Wars. One of the problems has been we have taught leaders to have, if you're not getting your point across, raise the volume. In fact, Dr. Michael Gerhardt of Germany made that point specifically. I thought it was a brilliant idea. We turned the volume up. And instead of looking for persuasion, today we're looking for resonance and alignment. Are we all aligned together on where this organization needs to go? And the metaphor I've been using is, for the last 60 or 70 years, we've raised leaders to be Jedi Knights. They're going to solve the problem, brandish the light sword and fix it. And I think that's part of this anxiety almost. No, I'll fix it. I don't want to hear that. And I think today people have to be more like Yoda. They have to be able to welcome, hey, look, here's the defined challenges. I'm the facilitator. I'm the learner, or the learning leader, if you will. I think in many respects, that's right on the money. You have to take a step back and let it happen. Bring the process forward. Go ahead.
Yeah, I love that perspective, and just full transparency. I'm a very assertive individual naturally. Raising the volume or pushing my assertiveness is a natural style for me. That's who I naturally am. Worked very well for me early in my life. I grew up in a very violent home, and I had to get loud to keep my parents from what I thought were going to kill each other. So you learn to use your voice to shut people down. In the military can work, but luckily I learned that it's not the right way growing up. When you have rank on your shoulder in the military, you can use that. But people are generally, they like the easy path. It's harder to create self-awareness, to lower your volume when you're naturally loud, to listen to all perspectives, to be more patient, to be alert. That's hard to do. I heard Jim Rohn say, what's easy to do is also easy not to do. Those things I described are easy to do. If you're not self-aware, they're extremely hard to do. What people do is they try that for a little while, like, well, I'm getting impatient. I'm not getting what I want. So they go back to the easy way, get loud or more aggressive, whatever those things are. My challenge for today with leaders that I'm working with, coaching and training, is trust the process, be patient, think long-term in how you're leading and managing things. Don't let your old effective in the minute ways become ineffective. They create more dysfunction in your leadership over the long term because people will eventually just shut down. And I think that's what we're seeing, John. You're a little bit older than me. Our generation has done the generations behind us a disservice. We start blaming that generation behind us, right? Oh, they're millennials, they're Gen Xers, they don't want to work as hard. We start blaming them because of our own ineffectiveness. I'm really challenging that status quo. John, you and I got to get better so we can leave better those behind us. Anyway, that's kind of my take on where we're at in leadership today.
I think you're right. I can see it. I feel it. I understand that, people will have to get things done. But what I think they fail to understand is when you bring a team along, when the whole team is hitting on all cylinders, everybody's in the game, everybody's understanding. This, in fact, one of the ways of the future I've been talking about lately, how fast can we take an idea, withstand, make the mistakes, learn from the mistakes, get back up the next day and reinvent. You can't do that if it's one person driving the boat. You're going to have everybody working together in AI as well. AI tools that are being developed, this rapid prototyping. You can't do that alone. You need a team. You need a group of people. Once you get them attuned to that, you can make changes a lot faster and better than one person who's just trying to manage or lead it.
So good.
Let me ask you this question. You've authored multiple books on leadership and talent development. If leaders could take just one key lesson from your books, what would you want that to be?
I'm responsible. My book doesn't really say that, right? In the book I co-authored, Breaking Average, I wrote a chapter on ownership. That's the chapter I authored. There was 8 of us that wrote this book, and the chapter I wrote was on ownership. I'm responsible. As a leader, John Maxwell says everything rises and falls on leadership. If I look around my team, if I've got high turnover, low productivity, low engagement, whatever it may be metric-wise, I'm responsible as a leader. I think that's the number one thing, John. In my experience, most people get promoted into leadership because they're really good at what they do, but they don't get supported. They don't get developed as a leader. They learned along the way to blame other people. Those people leave because they got more money. In reality, they take pretty much the same job and maybe get a quarter more an hour. They're not leaving for money. They're leaving because there's a cultural issue, a teamwork issue, or an accountability issue within the team. The leader's responsible for challenging that status quo to making things different versus just stepping in. Even though most companies promote people up and don't support them and develop them, there's some companies that do it well. A lot of companies don't do that well because they get busy. They have good intentions, but John will figure it out. He'll figure it out. He's a smart guy. But in reality, what I do is I challenge, and I had to do this for myself. I was responsible for my own personal growth. I've read thousands of books and listened to hundreds of books on Audible and podcasts. And there's a self-development mindset that eventually you have to own. If you want to get better, it's a framework of how to attract the right talent, how to hire them, keep them, motivate them. At the end of the day, you're responsible for that. Even if the company's got some internal structural issues, you can overcome those just within your team. I've done that in my own leadership where the company at the corporate level was not very good at some things, but I could create that culture within my team to overcome some of those challenges at the corporate level. But a lot of leaders just blame, well, I don't get the support I need from the corporate office or from HR. I just challenge leaders, get better right where you're at. And eventually, even if it doesn't work out for you here, John, you'll be better the next job that you take if you develop those skills today. So I think it's ownership and responsibility.
Yeah, another point. I can't tell you how many guests I've had on my podcast where we talk about the issue of vulnerability.
Yeah, it's good.
The ability to say, I made a mistake. I own it. I made a mistake. But one of the things I learned in the military was, okay, fine. What are you going to do to fix it?
Yeah.
What's the flip side of this now? And the alternative. You messed up. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. Can you fix it? Yeah, I can fix it. Okay, let's go fix it. And we move on to the next thing. I think that's the problem. I think there is this notion, and maybe this is just a personal observation, people are trying to be perfect.
Yeah.
And there's no such thing.
Yeah.
People make mistakes. People make errors. Now, a lot of times there are leaders who are looking for someone who's vulnerable and imperfect so they can do the blame game on them. This may very well be one of the reasons why, as I've had several colleagues tell me, there's such a trust deficit in many workplaces today. trust, to me, is the fuel that runs the engine of every organization. I'd love to get your reflection on that.
Yeah, I love that vulnerability piece. It's probably the piece I had to learn the most. We grow up being taught to hide your failures, don't admit your mistake, don't let people see your weaknesses. And you get into a leadership role and you're exposed. If you don't know what your weaknesses are, just ask your team. Set aside your egos because they'll tell you. And so we walk around trying to be perfect, trying to hide our mistakes or failures, but everybody else knows what they are. The sooner we can learn to be okay with those and admit, hey, I'm not perfect. I'm going to make mistakes, John. But when I do, I want you to bring those to my attention. And I'm going to do the same for you because we're in this together. I may be the leader, but we're leading together. It just means that I've got to make some decisions you won't always agree with, but we're here to grow each other. I want you to let me know about my failures, my mistakes, so that I can get better as a leader. I think that's a key thing that all leaders could do a better job of today.
Yeah, and I think as far as communication is concerned, we have to change the dynamic from conversations to dialogue. The dialogue is meaning being transferred back and forth. A friend of mine always to have a conversation, but to him, it's a debate and he has to win.
Yeah.
So when he starts that, I'm not getting into this because there is no movement on your part. I've been sucked into this a few times and I'm just not going there because there is no movement on your part. You will consistently defend your position, even if it doesn't hold water.
We see a lot of that in the world today, don't we?
Oh my God, it makes you crazy. Listen, it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to say, I don't know, but I'm going to find out. There is this notion, there is this perspective in the military. All you do is bark orders, run around barking orders at people. And the answer is, oh, it doesn't work. We call it the all volunteer force for a reason. People volunteer to come and they can volunteer to leave, and you lose your best ones that way.
Yeah.
So it's always the ability to work, build trust, collaborate, talk things over, officers, senior enlisted, junior enlisted. Let's find the best way to do something. Works really well.
The civilian world, as we call it, outside the military, they see the commercials of the drill sergeants and the special forces and all the screaming and yelling. There's a lot of reality. Drill sergeants do a lot of screaming and yelling. That's their job. They're playing a role. In my experience, most drill sergeants were some of the nicest and best leaders. That the greatest leaders I ever worked for were in the military. I got out of active duty in 1998, spent another 6 years in the reserve. The best leaders I worked for were in the military, and some of the worst leaders were in the civilian world. The screamers and yellers and dictators. Like, you're absolutely right. The military, behind the commercials, there's some great leadership. It's where I began my leadership journey. I went in kind of as a hard charger, aggressive, using my voice, and I learned because of some great leaders, this is how you lead people. This is what you got to grow. This is what you've got to develop. I'm forever grateful for those leaders that helped me understand that.
Yeah, that's where I learned trust, the foundation point. If you have no trust, you have no relationship. They don't trust you. You don't trust them. And there's no mutual trust within a group, division, or department, platoon, or company is built on trust. I appreciate your comments. You've been deeply involved with the John Maxwell leadership team and even co-hosted the Maxwell Leadership Podcast. How did those experiences shape your own leadership philosophy?
I think it deepened why I gravitated toward John Maxwell. His leadership philosophy is based on solid values to lead well and build trust. You have to have it. One of the things I learned in working closely with is he is who he says he is. I'm sure you've had experiences where the public face of people, but then when you meet them kind of behind the scenes, they're not the same individuals, right? With John Maxwell, he's the guy you see in public is the same guy you see in private. Treats people with the utmost respect, doesn't hold himself higher than any other individual, and he could. He's considered one of the world's top thinkers on leadership. That impacted me a lot, John, just seeing that you can be a leader of people and also be extremely humble and be just like anyone else. I probably experienced that from John more than anybody. John started this company called the John Maxwell Team in 2011. I was one of the first 300 people that got certified as a John Maxwell trainer and coach. Now there's 30 or 40,000 people. I'm not involved anymore because my own business is so big and I just don't have time to interact. But I met people literally from every corner of the globe. And the other thing I learned is that we're more alike than we're different. No matter where you're from in the world, we are more alike than we are different. Unfortunately, if you watch the news or you spend too much time on social media, all you'll see is our differences. You know, John, you and I will not agree about everything as it relates to leadership, but we're more alike than we are different. That's true for anybody around the world. The military taught me, but in a different way than the Maxwell team. There was a common thread of values-based leadership in the Maxwell team, which is a little bit different. The common mission in the military, but not necessarily a common set of values. I learned a ton from both places for sure.
Great. I appreciate that very much. I remember listening to this where it says, everything you learn in life doesn't get wasted. It all adds up. It all gets together in your brain later on. It all kind of coalesces, if you will. And I think wherever you draw, whether you're in the military and civilian world, the experiences that you have, it forms who you are as you move through life. So I absolutely agree with that. I want to ask you about quit losing talent cultural framework. As you know, retention, keeping people is a top priority in workplaces today. I want you to talk about the quit losing talent cultural framework. What is it? How do you use it? And why does it make sense?
Thank you, John, for allowing me to talk about my book. It's a new spin on old ideas. I use the term attraction instead of recruitment because I believe too many companies get focused on recruiting a body. One of the things that increases their turnover is the body they recruited was not a fit culturally for the organization. I talk about attraction versus recruitment. We attract people like we are. It goes back to our values. One of the first things I teach is target check your values. That's the first tactic in the 20 tactics that I teach in the book. We have to check our values. What do we stand for? What do we believe about these values? How does that show up? And we use those as an attraction tool to select people that are more in alignment with that. Then I move from attraction to what I call activation versus onboarding. Many companies have an onboarding procedure where they spend 1, 2, or 3 days in a classroom learning all the things about the company, and that becomes the onboarding. And I talk about activation. We want to activate the full potential. My definition of leadership is activating the potential of other people or bringing out the best in other people. I teach companies to have a system, a process to activate them over 90 days. We teach things like stay navigator and stay ambassador, mastering the welcome in that activation process. The retention piece is still retention, but we teach real tactical things in that retention box, like a talent lock conversation with our people on a regular basis, like checking in with them. What can I do better as a leader? What's something that's getting in the way of you being ultra successful? And instead of having a once a year employee evaluation, the talent lock conversation is, what do I need to do better, John, to keep you here? What would make you stick? Is there anything that's going to create a reason for you to leave? I think companies lose the most money in the release phase. Most companies do what they call exit interviews. They don't learn anything from it that could help them be better in that attraction and activation phase. And so those are the 4 strategies. We've got 5 tactics in each one of those strategies. When we do well, John, it becomes like the flywheel that Jim Collins teaches in Good to Great. If we do those well consistently, we keep that flywheel running. It's going to reduce our turnover, help us attract the talent that fits our organization, improve our engagement. Over time, the bottom line, the profits, we see a result from that. So really just a framework, a system that we teach leaders that have never been taught this stuff. Part of it is because my experience, you mentioned I've interviewed over 20,000 people, teaching people how to interview correctly versus, John, why do you want this job? What do you know about our company? Those aren't really good interviews, right? Can you breathe and can you work 8 to 5? If you say, yes, I'll hire you. I teach people to dive deeper into that interview to make a better selection, because if we make a bad selection, our leadership gets really hard. Now we got to try to make that person work we got to try to make sure we don't lose our team because we're trying to make this person work. I'm always like, hire slow, fire fast. If you know you made a mistake, let's go ahead and move on. Pay them a month and then let them move on, right? It's those 20 tactics within the 4 strategies that we teach to implement that framework.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think values alignment is key. In fact, it's the number one requirement of a multi-generational workforce. A lot of it has to do with what surfaced this, let me put it that way, is the after effect of the pandemic. People not working just for a paycheck anymore. Now they're looking for impact. They want to join a company whose values reflect their own. In recruiting, I teach this thing called a shared values recruiting exercise, a way to open the conversation up about an individual's values. But here's the flip side of that, Mike. You can recruit on values, but if the organization itself is unable to articulate its own values, then how can you hope to make those two things up? You have to have a succinct, one-sentence mission statement. This is who we are. This is what we do. This is where we're going. I use the slogan of the movie 300 with Gerard Butler, this is Sparta. But that was a slogan. It wasn't a mission statement, but it's a slogan. And you look around and go, does anybody not know who we are? No, everybody knows who we are. We're Sparta. Don't mess with us. But it was very clear, very clean, very beautiful to everybody who lived in Sparta, including the farmers who made the grain, tended the cattle to feed the warriors. Everybody was on board with that. You got to build a bridge from both sides of the river. A person has to have a value system that you could look at and evaluate, as well as the organization needs to articulate their values. You stop wasting time. We're not here to recruit bodies. We're here to recruit people.
That's right.
And we need people that are in sync with what we do and where we're going. So I absolutely agree.
Yeah, there are no bad people. There's just bad matches, right? A bad match for you is going to be a perfect match for somebody else. And that's the key in the recruitment process, is to make sure we don't get a bad match.
If you find someone who's not a right match, one of the great things you can do is to say, maybe this is not the right job for you. Maybe you need to go someplace else. Based on what I see, you might want to think of these things, or here's some tools to help you figure out where you might want to go, where you need to go, so you can be happy. You can be productive. You can live a good life. You put a plus sign on that rather than a negative sign. I agree with you 100%. Listen, we're getting close to the end here. So I'd like to ask you my world famous question. If you had a magic wand and you could change one thing, what would that thing in your work world be, and why did you choose that?
Why would I choose that thing? I think for me, I'm an idealistic kind of guy, John. I think that everyone would believe in their own potential as much as I believe in their potential. Everybody wants better in life or in leadership, but they don't always believe it's possible for them. I get disappointed at times. You have to be real careful doing what you and I do. We know we're giving our best, but the people we're always giving our best to aren't really as motivated, inspired, or even have that self-belief that it's possible for them. And the reason I say that is it goes back to what I started with. My grandmother, she inspired that belief in me, right? She wanted it for me. Luckily, I wanted it as bad as she wanted it for me. And I've continued to do what I do just to honor her legacy in my own life. But that's my answer today. I could probably give you a lot of different answers for that.
That's great. One of the other things I'm really zeroing in on now, Mike, and certainly, my dad was a PTSD survivor in World War II with a hair trigger temper. I was the object of the hair trigger most of the time growing up.
Yeah.
So I understand what it's like to manage your way through those kinds of difficulties. But talking to so many wonderful guests, I've had 2 guests that went to prison, told me that it saved their lives.
Yeah.
These kinds of difficult times they had to overcome. One of the things I'm really zeroing in on right now, Mike, is one of the key hiring requirements should be
That's good.
hire for heart. Because people who have persevered difficult and complex and overwhelming difficult situations know how to do things. They know how to get through it. They know how to fix problems. And in the end, they've taken responsibility and moved themselves forward. The 6 or 7 guests I have interviewed have told me unbelievable stories. 27 years old, single mother, 4 children, no money. She is now the top designer of medical facilities throughout the United States. Never once did any of the guests use the word, I was a victim.
Yeah.
Never once. Never said, you know what, the world victimized me, I'm done. No.
Yeah.
I'm going to find a way.
That's
I'm going
right.
to find a way through this. And I think going back to your point, people have got to understand we've all taken it on the chin at different times in our life. It's what you do with it. It's not how many times you get knocked down. It's how many times you get up.
Amen.
And I think that's absolutely true. I'd love to have your final reflection on that.
No, it's absolutely true. There are no failures in life, only lessons, right? From them, a failure is quitting. When you quit, when you give up, that's what real failure is. One of the greatest things I ever did was take up a reading habit, start reading biographies and autobiographies of those that have gone before us. We only see people's highlights most of the time. People may see you and I on this podcast and see our highlight reel. What they don't see are all the stumbles and falls and failures we've had along the way to learn the lessons to get to this place. I highly recommend that everybody take up a reading habit. I could give you thousands of books to read. Start with some autobiographies or biographies. You know, Abraham Lincoln, look at his failures. He failed before he became president like 15, 20 times before he was ever elected president. We all need lessons like that in life.
Yeah, I agree. One of my most favorite books, a book changed my life, is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for
Meaning. Yeah.
Incredible book. Incredible life. Listen, Mike, thank you so very much for your time today here on the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. I can't thank you enough. I wish you all the great success in the future. The best to you and your family. Thank you so very much for your time.
John, thanks for having me on your show. Appreciate it. Look forward to seeing the finished product.